Dave Guskin wrote today a long post about two topics: card bans and Riftbound, and also the new set Unleashed and changes to the rules. Let's focus on the bans first. We're discussing card bans in the near future based on overly dominant play patterns, but none to announce today nor an expected date for bans. But we got more informations. So, we're watching the meta evolve after Spirit Forge in large competitive events like the 4 minor opens held in China, along with the RQs in Bologna and in Vegas, and have been keeping a close eye on strategies that may be becoming too dominant, creating frustrating play patterns. We definitely have one deck at least that creates that pattern, at least in my opinion. We promise to keep you updated if we're considering bans, and based on what we're seeing, we've begun internal discussions about the possibility. Now, I don't think we would be saying this unless Riot really does think that something is being warranted a ban, right? So then the next thing is, as we shared last month, our philosophy is that bans should only be used as a last resort. For us to remove a card from play, there needs to be a strong and specific reason, and we must firmly believe the change will significantly improve the player experience. And I feel like this is very important what he's saying here. The player experience is, for example, how the opponent reacts to what the player is doing. So in case when one player is just hogging all the time in the round, right, that is a problem. That is a bad player experience. Next post says, our goal is to take careful approach, ensuring that as many cards as possible in each set remain viable. That is a very good point. Banning something that might be important for a deck will completely destroy the deck. If we do see a concern trending across all levels of play, we'll respond as quickly and decisively as we can. We're watching as the meta continues to develop and reviewing the data, and no final calls have been made quite yet. We'll wait until after Shenzhen Major Open in late March before making any changes. This is incredibly important to understand the context. As we promised, we've committed to not making large changes so close to competitive events to try and ensure players have a chance to playtest and adapt. And having in mind what we just heard, Lille is in April 17 to 19th. Right? So we don't have a lot of time till that event. Now, when you listen to what Dave said, so if the Chinese tournament is happening on 28th of 29th, that means that the announcement for bans, it's only be possible to be made on 30th and 31st of March, because otherwise the tournament in Lille is gonna be too fast, too close to the date, right? It needs to be like 3 weeks. It's not even 3 weeks here. If we announce the bans on 30th, then 3 weeks, it's gonna be essentially 21st, right? So that's not even it. That's not even 3 full weeks. So we need that 2.5 weeks to have the ban announcement, to make decks, to play them, test them. And this favors so much the players who have capable teams. If you're more like a hobbyist, or like you're playing around alone, you don't have like a group of really hardcore players, you're not gonna benefit from this. You're actually gonna be in a detrimental position. But if you're a hardcore part of like a team, this is ideal scenario for Lille. So for example, for someone like Alan, for the Randy, Prismatism, I don't know if they have a name for the team, but then Challenger TCG, all of those people, they will be so happy because in those 2 weeks they can sit down, work out the new metagame, and try to take the event by storm. People who are not part of the teams are gonna have a harder time actually establishing what is good in the new metagame because they don't have the same resources. But what makes me think that those bans need to happen, or at least will happen, is because why else would they be talking about the bans in this specific timing, explaining that there will be no bans for the Chinese metagame, right? And I feel like there's gonna be a very high chance that the Shenzhen Major is gonna have a major impact on the decision. If there's gonna be a complicated top 8, for example, there's gonna be a lot of Draven and Miracle specifically in the top 8 or like in the top 64, then Riftbound might actually get those bans the day after, right? They might be just prepared. If they're not gonna see enough problems in the top finish in the Chinese region, then maybe we'll not get them. But this announcement kind of sets up the stage for us players to actually expect them to happen, because I feel Riot is also anticipating that the problem will only like grow bigger. But my opinion is that it's great to see this level of transparency and communications from Dave here, which is very refreshing when it comes to the comparison to other games. So I'm happy that they talk about it. Am I happy that they're gonna be banned? No, I would rather have no bans, right? But if you have to ban cards, well, there definitely needs to be a good reason for, and I feel like there's enough justification to ban some of the cards that we currently have in the game. I already made a video about my opinions about that as well, but I'm gonna reiterate that we have few cards that are just essentially broken fundamentally, and one of them is Cold Shot. 0 mana for drawing cards is historically always bad. It's like this card is broken, but the problem is if this card gets banned, then unfortunately a lot of archetypes that we have in Riftbound might cease to exist. For example, the best deck in the game, in my opinion, which is Ezreal Control, I don't think you can play it without the Cold Shots. You don't have anything that takes its place in the same efficiency, with the same efficiency, and Ezreal kinda lives or dies by drawing those Cold Shots as soon as possible, because he also has access to the Ezreal Prodigy, right? But then we have also Sivir Miracle, Draven Miracle. You probably will see the problem here, right? There's a lot of Miracle decks over here. Jinx, Nox Miracle, all of those decks are playing the Cold Shots, but we're gonna have also Teemo Control who relies on that. You're gonna have all the purple non-mid-range decks, right, rely on Cold Shot. Any mono who is like, okay, Miracle will play Cold Shots, but any mid-range will not play Cold Shots, right? So those decks will not get affected. And if those decks will disappear, what happens then to other type of decks, right? We have to think about the cascading effect of one ban, what happens then to the metagame. Because if all of those Miracle decks are disappearing, right, Draven midrange and Irelia can now be tailored into a metagame when they don't have to play against Miracle, which makes them even stronger contenders, while the other decks, they don't really gain that much because they didn't have any way of countering those Miracle decks most likely anyway, right? So that is one of the big issues that a developer needs to face when they're gonna be banning such a powerful card that essentially will not allow the other archetypes to exist anymore. And if that happens, I feel like other bans will need to happen as well. I think Stellarcorn Herder is one of those cards that will absolutely define the metagame if Cold Shots stop existing. Because Herder, I know it's not really like maybe a controversial opinion, but it is really, really broken. The card draw on a card that is like, you know, you just move, you draw, it doesn't cost anything. You have a free might unit that is not exactly bad. It goes over two drops as well of the opponents. Is a problematic card. So if we're gonna ban Cold Shots, are we also banning Stellarcorn Herder? Are we also gonna ban Rebuke? Because then if we ban Rebuke, we're gonna have a problem with Ferris Forerunner. If without Rebukes, this guy is going to be played in 3 copies in every single red deck, and they're going to define the metagame as well. So, as you can see, there's not one decision that just makes a lot of sense because it will just fix the metagame. If you fix one problem, or if you like contain a leak, you're gonna have a problem with other leaks popping up, right? There are gonna be multiple holes, but that's just the way that card games work. The metagames will always have a problem. We want to play powerful cards, but at the same time, we don't want too powerful cards, right? But if the powerful cards are getting banned, and then a powerful answer gets also getting banned, then other cards might become oppressive. And that might happen to Herder, that might happen to Ferris Forerunner, and in general, the gameplay might actually suffer from that. And even with that said, I think Cold Shot needs to go. I think that card is actually too oppressive, but there's also one problem that is very important to talk about, and that's the pace of play. Because if we get a deck like the new Detonate Draven that won the SCG Con Richmond, the 10k, this deck is, I love it. I love it. I think it's phenomenal. It's a beauty to play. And I love Miracle Draven. I played a lot myself. But the version with detonates and with the treasure troves is just absolutely mental. Like, this deck becomes so consistent. It's unbelievable. I played a lot of Miracle Draven in my life so far. And when I chose to test this deck live stream today on my channel, I just couldn't believe it. Like, this deck is so much easier to play than the normal Miracle because it doesn't brick. Like, you will have the card draw. That's it. There's no way of not drawing your deck. Like, you can actually set up your deck so much more easily than the normal Miracle, specifically also when you don't play cards like Noxus Hopeful, you don't play Nocturnes, you can brick those stuff, and then instead of them, you have the treasure troves and detonates. You just always draw into things that you need. And if you're a good pilot that then will be able to navigate the board state, then you almost can never lose. It's really that broken. And I know there are gonna be some answers, probably, but are they gonna be reliable enough to battle against this deck? I don't think so. And that might be a big problem. So big congrats, by the way, to the I don't know who made this deck. I don't think it was John Rosum, but it's beauty. It's an absolute beauty. It's a well-oiled machine, and it's probably the main reason why we're gonna be looking at bans. Because the thing is, now when you play a deck like this, you're hogging the time, and that is the bad experience that Dave was talking about here, like the creating frustrating play patterns, but also the player experience is significantly affected by decks like this. Imagine this: if you never played against this deck, the Draven player, if he's not super efficient at playing his own deck, he might actually play like 3-4 minute turns every single time, because he's going to be making so many decisions. And if he's going to be making so many decisions, the timer will be eaten by one player when the other player doesn't even have an opportunity to play the game. So the other player would need to call a judge to call a slow play. But then it's hard to decide if it's actually a slow play or if the player just has a lot of decisions and is justified to eat that much time. But that should not be the consideration in the first place anyway. And that is a bad experience for everyone involved, including the judges, right? Because you need to make a call about something that you feel like it maybe should not be punished, but you kind of have to. So that creates an environment where no one is happy about, and that needs fixing. So that is probably the most important reason why cards like Cold Shot might get the axe, might get the hammer. There's also a possibility that there will be some changes towards the Draven midrange itself, right? Because if you ban Cold Shot and Draven midrange will just be the best tier S deck ever, then maybe you need to do something about Draven himself as well. And maybe we'll see the errata to how combat works, but I don't think that will happen, because it would already happen when we had the previous iteration of erratas and changes to the rules. And also, Rioters did tell us that they do not want to change the rules to nerf some cards, and that would be the outcome with Glorious Executioner if they would change how combat works, and it would not count if there's no enemy in the combat because of combat damage, right? So sorry, like if there would be no combat conclusion because of combat damage, it would not count as combat. That would change the entire game. They don't want to do that, so I don't think that will happen. But the mid-range Draven definitely needs a hit. And then some people are saying that Draven Vanquisher might be banned because there's still another Draven that can be played instead. And Draven Vanquisher, it is actually a problem, because the main reason why you play the Miracle decks with the Draven is because you have a non-power costing unit that is incredibly powerful on your turn 2 always, which is basically like cheating a mulligan, because you will always have a turn 2 play that will allow you to stay on the curve, right? But if that Draven gets banned, then we have the Draven Showboat still accessible if someone wants to have a champion unit that is red. So there is a possibility that that might be a decision as well, and that will actually affect the Draven decks quite heavily, specifically the mid-range version, but also of course the Miracle. But if the Miracle gets the Cold Shot banned, then it doesn't matter anyway. Also from the battlefields, there are some that I would maybe like to see affected by the bans. Like for example, there's a few of them that I think could be looked at, and one of them would be Reaver's Row. I think Reaver's Row is the battlefield that makes just very uninteresting play patterns when it comes to how the game is being played, and it also synergizes with mid-range Draven, and I feel like that's just what would want to have this in the game. It synergizes with all the movement units for no reason as well. It also makes Herder better. Like, we don't need this location, this battlefield in the game, and I think it actually would improve the player's experience if Reaver's Row would not be in the game, and I don't think anyone would be mad about it as well. At the same time, I do think there's another problem that might arise, and that problem is Aurora. And I know, another hot take, just like the Herder, but I think Aurora creates also a kind of bad experience for players, and the problem is this card is an epic. The other cards we were mentioning, they were all commons, maybe uncommon, you know, they were not worth any money. Aurora is an epic, it's one of the chase cards essentially in Origins, and it creates another archetype as well, right? You have a completely different archetype, like any other, like no other deck plays in the same way that the Dazzling Aurora deck plays, which is nice to have, just like the Miracle. It's just a completely different side of the coin when it comes to diversity in your card game. The problem is they do create uninteractive experience in many cases, right? And that is something that also falls into the player's experience. So not only that, in a world where cold shot is gone, I feel like Aurora decks are gonna be rising in popularity very much, and that might be also the reason why Dazzling Aurora might be, or should be, maybe getting the ban. But again, this is very like ahead of time, because it would showcase that if something like this would happen, it would showcase to me that the developers are actually thinking like 3 steps ahead. So the Herder, the Aurora, if something like that gets banned, it does really show that the devs are thinking very much ahead and are thinking what can happen with the consideration of the new metagame. But also remember, we're gonna have a new set very, very, very soon. In China, it's gonna be actually happening like as soon as I think April hits, but in Europe we're gonna have it, if I'm not mistaken, early May or late April, something like that. But my point is, it is a problem that needs to be solved to some degree, but at the same time solving it maybe will create worse experience. So if you would ask me about my opinion, I feel like probably it's worth the risk to take and ban cold shot, but at the same time, would I ban more cards straight away? Probably not, but it might create an environment that then needs a second step of fixing. But the problem is, the second step of fixing would need to take time to gather data and see how the environment looks like. And also very important, many people use argument that Vegas and Bologna, or like any other really big event, doesn't really have bad metagame. But it feels like people just forget casually that the metal foil cards exist. The reason why we don't have unhealthy metagame in those events is because we have the metal foil cards, and they shift people's priorities. So not many people actually play Draven to win the event, or like play Ezreal Control or anything else that is like very strong in the metagame, but rather they play pet decks that might get them a $10,000 prize plus or even more, right? Just because they choose a different deck than a Draven deck. And then you see the same thing in conversions to day 2, you see finally like how decks like Draven convert 200%. It's insane. Like a deck which is the most popular in the environment, or at least should also not be converting that much. Like statistically, it should not be possible, and yet it does happen because Draven is just so much better than everything else. Right? And now with rising popularity of the miracle decks, which are actually now min-max, and I think the detonate deck is just obnoxiously good, you're gonna have this problem go even further, right? So you cannot use the data from the metal foil events, because I think that data is spoiled, and I hope the developers are fully aware of that. I mean, they most likely certainly are, so we shouldn't worry about that, but I feel like the audience at least should be aware of that as well, because maybe some of the people are not thinking about that, and it's a big fact. So personally, I'm very excited to see this level of transparency coming from the devs and showing us the direction, or at least the expectations, and I'm looking forward to what actually gonna happen in the Chinese regional that I will be covering, of course, on this channel over here, and we're gonna see what after that will happen as well. So keep an eye close, more videos to come about this topic for sure, and soon we're gonna also probably start the spoiler season for Unleashed, so maybe that will also tell us a little bit more about the direction of the game for set 3. See ya till next time, bye bye.